Hi everyone and welcome. Today we are diving into how to navigate the Statement of Interest for York University's Master of Social Work program. Before we get started, my name is Alyssa and I'm an application advisor with MSW Helper, which is a platform dedicated to helping people like you increase their odds of getting accepted into an MSW program. I know when I was applying to programs, I remember feeling very overwhelmed, really not sure what schools wanted, especially because I did not have a BSW background, and not really sure what to do to help make my statement stand out. But with the support of MSW Helper, I ended up getting accepted or waitlisted everywhere I applied, and now I get to help other applicants just like you do the same. Quick disclaimer, MSW Helper is not affiliated with York University. These are just our tips and opinions based on our expertise and experience reviewing thousands of personal statements. If you're applying to multiple schools, you may have already noticed that York's Statement of Interest is not like most other MSW personal statements. You're not being asked to convince them of your motivation for pursuing social work or to tell them all about the experiences you have that prepare you for the profession. Instead, York asks you to write a short 500-word critical essay on a social justice issue you care about to see whether you can analyze an issue through that kind of structural, anti-oppressive lens that they use. Ultimately, York wants to know how you think, what questions you're asking as you approach a social issue, and if you see these issues as systemic rather than individual. Specifically, their instructions state, write a statement about a contemporary social justice issue that interests you. Please answer in 500 words maximum, double-spaced, and include the following components. 1. Describe the social issue. 2. Explain why this is a social issue and the factors that contribute to it. 3. Discuss the impacts it has on individuals, families, communities, and/or society. 4. Discuss what can be done to promote social change and reduce suffering with respect to the social issue. So, what changes can be made? 5. If you wish, you may include any personal, community, professional, and/or academic experiences you have had related to the social issue. And 6, explain why you believe York University's School of Social Work is a good choice for you given your research and practice interests. My first tip for approaching York's Statement of Interest is to start by choosing a social issue that is specific. Reviewers are going to start forming impressions from your very first sentence or two based on your topic. If your topic is too broad, too descriptive, or too generic, for example, mental health in Canada or addictions, it's gonna be a real challenge to show that you have the critical lens that York is looking for. It's also going to be really hard to answer the prompts fully and in the depth that you need to really impress them in only 500 words. A strong topic will be specific, structural, and clearly focused. It will immediately tell reviewers that you understand the social issue is political, policy-driven, and produced by systems, not just individual circumstances or behavior. For example, instead of homelessness in Ontario, which is quite broad, you want something closer to age-based termination of foster care support contributing to youth homelessness in Ontario. Even though these both cover the same theme of homelessness, they send radically different messages. The second is much more focused and already shows evidence of critical analysis. And speaking of critical analysis, that's tip number 2. you really, really, really need to demonstrate critical analysis in the statement of interest for your work. And this is where I see a lot of applicants struggle. I think the term critical analysis is really hard to wrap your head around if you haven't already obtained a BSW degree, or if you're not already in a Master of Social Work program. I know when I was applying, I had absolutely no idea what that term meant. And that's common. But really, when they say critical analysis, they want you to name things like the systems that shape the issue. For example, housing policy, child welfare, immigration. They want you to name the mechanisms that produce harm or reinforce it and maintain it. So, for example, eligibility rules. And they want you to name things like the assumptions or the ideologies that are behind it. For example, colonialism, neoliberalism, ableism, carceral logic. What critical analysis is not, and some traps that I often see applicants fall into, is describing the problem, providing statistics, saying that it's important, integrating research, sharing your feelings about it. While these are all elements that can make for a strong personal statement, they're not critical analysis. Even if you're putting a bunch of research into it, if the research is quite descriptive and isn't getting into those things I mentioned, like the systems, the mechanisms, the assumptions, or ideologies behind it, you're not going into the strong critical analysis that York's looking for. And if you're still thinking, I don't fully understand what critical analysis looks like in writing, no worries. I've got you covered here with some examples that'll show it in context. The first, which is going to be a weaker example, is really going to be heavy on description. So something like, in Ontario, youth aging out of foster care face higher rates of homelessness. According to the Ontario Association of Children's Aid Societies, almost 50% of youth leaving care experience homelessness within 2 years. Many struggle with rent costs, lack of family support, and barriers to employment, and so on. It's not terrible, and it actually integrates research, which is a sign of analytical thinking skills. However, it doesn't really have that kind of critical analysis that I described. A stronger example that really integrates that strong critical analysis will sound something more like young people aging out of foster care in Ontario face a heightened risk of homelessness when support ends abruptly at age 18. Rather than treating care as relational and ongoing, policy frames it as temporary and conditional, with the assumption that emerging adults should transition into independence without structural support. This reflects broader neoliberal ideas of ... So hopefully that helps give a bit more of an idea. You'll see that in this stronger example, there was more of a structural focus, much more specific, discussions of the systems involved, of who holds power, of what the mechanisms are that really create this social issue, as well as the ideologies when it starts getting into neoliberalism. And now for tip number 3, you want to connect your experience to your critical thinking if you include experience at all. Do remember that this is completely optional. You don't have to include any experiences, and it's totally okay if you don't have experiences related to your topic. I do think it often can be very strong if someone has experience they can reference. But even then, if you do include experience, you need to be very strategic about how you use it. And you need to show how you've engaged with your topic in real life contexts, as well as any insights you've gained or action you've already taken towards addressing it. Maybe you are engaged in advocacy or some kind of community around it. And you need to do all of this very concisely, because with 500 words to address all these parts of the prompts, you don't have time to give a ton of detail on your personal experience. Because really the key part of this one is going to be showing that you can critically analyze a social justice issue and that you can show and explain why York's program is the ideal fit for you. So if you include experience, it should show what you've noticed. It should demonstrate reflection. It should support your critical analysis. And it could also be used to show that you're already taking action, social justice aligned action in this area. So strong experience writing is going to sound something like, during X role, I began noticing Y systemic pattern, which raised questions about how Z operates. Whereas weak experience writing, it tends to be very long-winded, very descriptive, it takes up a lot of words, and it's essentially saying something like, this happened to me, so now I really care and want to help. So remember that your experience should not tell your whole life story. It shouldn't be summarizing your resume. And also be very careful about relying on trauma disclosure. We never want to go into the area of trauma dumping. It's totally okay to use lived experiences and to talk about hardships. Lived experience is very much valued in social work, including York's program, but it still needs to be used very strategically, and it needs to follow that pattern of using your personal experience to demonstrate a deeper level of systemic insight, of social justice action, and it needs still, again, to be very concise and framed more, I would say, politically and critically than personally. So we're thinking more along the lines of something like, my experience with X revealed how eligibility rules produce instability, and so on and so forth. The key takeaway with this one is that York isn't asking necessarily what happened to you or what experience you have more generally. They're still really wanting to know what you've learned about systems because of it, or how you've engaged on an advocacy or kind of social justice type way with the issue. And lastly, tip number 4, demonstrate fit with York's critical lens. If you follow all of the earlier tips, you're already going to be well on your way to demonstrating that you align with York's critical anti-oppressive lens. But you still are going to need to clearly explain why their program is the ideal fit for your research and practice interests. So end by briefly explaining why York's approach fits your topic, how your goals align with the program, and really make sure you make it clear, like, why this program? Why not the University of Toronto? Why not Laurier? Why not any other MSW program? Why is York specifically the right fit? And of course, like, you can lean more into this anti-oppressive, critical social work lens, but there's also other things you can think of. York does have a somewhat strong focus on research, even though they don't offer a thesis option. Every student does a kind of research project that is on a topic of your choice. So if that's something you're interested in, talk about that briefly. It'll help show that you've done your homework and that you align with another unique aspect of their approach. You can also look at if you can see any specific courses they have that are unique, that really align with your topic and your goals and the type of social worker you want to become. You can also look at faculty members. Are there any faculty members who have done research and have expertise that relates to your social area of social justice interest, or your professional goals or the populations you want to work with. That can be another great way to show that specific alignment with York. And because I know that showing alignment with a program can be very challenging for a lot of applicants, it's one of the spots that I very often see applicants produce very generic paragraphs that could kind of apply to any school, or that any applicant could write, and they all kind of would look the same. I do want to show some examples to hopefully make it a little bit more clear. So a weak example of showing alignment with the program would sound something like, I am excited about the possibility of studying at York University and developing the advanced social work skills needed to support youth experiencing homelessness. The program's focus on social justice aligns with my values, and I would be grateful for the opportunity to learn and grow in York's Master of Social Work program. Now, this isn't actually the worst I've seen. It does do some things right, like it clearly names the specific population and of interest for the person and the area of interest they have, right? Youth experiencing homelessness. It also does reference social justice, which is okay, although all MSW programs are quite focused on social justice, so it's not unique to York. But it could be a lot better. So a stronger example would be something like, working with youth who aged out of care has shaped my understanding of homelessness as a structural issue. York's commitment to critical social work, along with coursework that interrogates power, policy, and dominant narratives, aligns with how I understand this issue and the approach I will bring to research and practice in this area, and so on and so forth. Now, I will say this actually is still a little bit too vague. It would be better if it could name specific courses, if it could name specific faculty members, if maybe they could talk about how they're excited to do the research project part of York's curriculum on this topic and how they want to kind of extend their knowledge in that area, and other kind of things like that. But it gives you an idea of the kind of depth that you want to show and how you can really make it more specific to you. A good tip I often give for these sections and paragraphs on your fit with the program is, once you read it, take a step back from it for a little bit, take a breather, but then come back to it and read it through the eyes, or like asking yourself, could this apply to another applicant? Or could I submit this to another school without changing it? And if you're finding that a bunch of other applicants could say the same thing without changing it, or that you could copy and paste this into your application for any other program, that's an indication you have not gotten specific enough. It really should read as something that you could only use for York, and that you would have to change a lot to make work for any other school. So just to wrap things up, key takeaways is 1, make sure your topic is specific enough. If it's too broad, you're going to make it so much harder for yourself, and you will reduce your odds of getting in. To really go into that critical analysis that they want to see, it needs to be a narrow enough issue that you can go in depth in a very limited amount of words that you have to work with. Second, you need to ask yourself, did you actually analyze, or did you research and describe? A lot of applicants think that they demonstrated critical thinking because they used research and statistics, and that isn't quite what York is looking for. They're not looking for a well-researched summary of the social issue. They want you to go beyond the symptoms and look at the systems, the mechanisms, the ideologies, the systems of power that create and maintain the issue, right? You really want to get into the why behind it. And third, make sure that your explanation of why York is the perfect fit for you is very specific and custom to you. I hope this has been helpful and that you're feeling more confident about writing your statement of interest for York University. And next great step is to check out our free personal statement template, which you can find using the link in the description below. Thank you so much for watching, and best of luck with your MSW applications.